Some children speak, some stay silent, but some speak while they sleep. People don't take words spoken in sleep seriously, because sleep has a rule. Dreams come, then fall apart. By morning, only a fractured feeling remains. But sometimes, no feeling remains at all. Sometimes, a sentence remains. And if that sentence is written down, if it enters a voice recording, then it is no longer a dream. The child does not scream, does not warn, does not threaten. Not like a prophecy, not like a fairy tale either. It is simply there. Some people love the silence of the night, but the silence of a house is something else, especially old houses. Wooden floors breathe, radiators click and knock, window frames expand in the cold, then pull back again. All of these sounds are familiar. They don't wake you. What wakes you is the unfamiliar absence. And if someone is truly listening, if someone, that night, chooses not to say stop, if someone begins recording not out of curiosity, but because of something they can't explain inside themselves, then those words do not stay inside the house for long. They leave. February 14th, 2019. Canterbury, Kent. 2:17 a.m. In an old house, a 5-year-old child whispered in his sleep. He is coming. At that moment, there was no one else in the room, but at the end of the hallway, there was a mother. And it is said that a mother recognizes her child's voice just as clearly as she recognizes when something is not her child's voice. Charlotte Williams did not open the door that night. She did not turn on the light. She did not shake her child awake. She simply listened, because sometimes, before a person decides something is real, they feel that its place has shifted. And that night, inside that house, something felt out of place. By morning, everything looked normal. The glasses were on the same shelf. The toys were in the same box. The child quietly drank his milk at breakfast. But inside Charlotte, there was a mark left from the night. A thin mark, like a crack in a wall that cannot be seen. And there are some cracks you do not touch, because you know, if you do, they will grow. At that moment, no one knew this was the first line of a file that would remain open for a long time. But files usually open this way, with a sentence, with a time, and with someone deciding, I should record this. Daytime, a quiet street in the northern neighborhoods of Canterbury. From the outside, the Williams family looked ordinary. They were good at looking that way. Charlotte Williams was 34, a school librarian. Her days passed among card catalogues, children's books, and silence. In a library, silence isn't a rule, it's a language. Charlotte loved books, but she didn't like stories that weren't on the page, because stories without pages don't come with endings. James Williams was 37, an electrical engineer. His mind worked in cables and circuit diagrams. If something breaks, there is a reason. If there is a reason, there is a solution. James's belief system was technical. You press the switch, the light turns on. You don't. It doesn't. And then there was Elon, 5 years old. Elon stands alone in the garden, examining a stone. Elon wasn't an only child in the world. There were dozens of children in the neighborhood. His daycare classroom was full, but even in crowds, Elon looked singular. Sometimes a child is alone because they are excluded. That wasn't Elon. Elon seemed to choose being alone, as if he wasn't trying to catch up to something, but waiting for it. Throughout her pregnancy, Charlotte felt anxious. There was no clear reason for it. Doctors said everything was normal. Blood tests normal. Ultrasounds normal. Everything normal. But sometimes the word normal doesn't bring relief. Sometimes it tightens something inside you. Because normal doesn't explain everything. The birth was difficult, long, fatigue, bright lights, urgency, but no complications. Once again, everything was labeled normal, except for one small thing. The baby didn't cry, not for the first 10 seconds. The nurse wrote a note in the file. Unusually calm. Years later, when Charlotte reread that note, she said something inside her chest went cold, because that night the word calm attached itself to something else. Elon's first word came late, almost 2.5 years old, and it wasn't Mama, it wasn't Dada. Charlotte had her phone camera ready, smiling, waiting. James joked, "Come on, son." Elon looked into the camera, tilted his head slightly to the side, and said, "Wait." His first word was, "Wait." James laughed. Charlotte laughed too, but both of them fell silent at the same time. Because when a 2.5-year-old's first word is, "Wait," you pause. Where did he learn that? At daycare, while other children ran, Elon sat in the corner. He didn't look sad. He didn't look angry. He was simply there. His teacher, Lucy, described him as well-adjusted. But even as she said the word, she hesitated, as if searching for another one. On Sunday mornings, the family went to the cathedral. Charlotte respected tradition. James wasn't religious, but he didn't object. Elon, however, he didn't behave like a child in church. Elon sits motionless on the wooden pew. A child gets bored during a long service. Elon didn't. Elon looked up. At the ceiling, the arches, the high stone walls. At one specific point, and when he looked there wasn't curiosity in his eyes. There was something closer to recognition. The first time Charlotte noticed, a sentence crossed her mind. This child, it's as if he's been here before. She never said it out loud. Because everyone has sentences they hesitate to say, even to themselves. And those sentences usually come back at night. Night, exterior of the house. Only one room is lit. February 14th, 2019, 2:17 a.m. Charlotte says she didn't dream that night, because some nights, even dreams are silent. She woke suddenly. She didn't know why. She opened her eyes, and the first thing she did was look at the clock, as if she already knew she had to. Digital display, 0217. Later, when she talked about it, Charlotte said, "I felt like I had seen that time before. But you can't prove something like that. You only feel it." She got out of bed. As she moved through the house, the wooden floor sighed softly. Charlotte stopped, as if she didn't want even that sound to be heard by anyone. There was no light in the hallway, but it wasn't complete darkness either. Moonlight slipping through the curtains washed the house in a pale blue. There was no sound, but there was no emptiness. Inside the house, there was an undefined sense of presence, as if the house itself was breathing. She felt something coming from the end of the hallway, from Elon's room. Charlotte stopped in front of the door. She reached for the handle, then pulled her hand back. Opening the door felt like starting something. She looked through the narrow opening. Elon was lying on his back in bed, eyes closed, breathing steady. And his lips moved. Elon, whispering, "He is coming." Charlotte took a step back, because the voice didn't sound like it came from a child's throat. When a child whispers, the voice trembles. Elon's didn't. It was steady, settled. Elon, not yet. A long pause followed. In that pause, Charlotte realized she was holding her breath. Sometimes a person doesn't react to what they hear, but to the space it leaves behind. Elon, the task will be completed. That sentence cut something inside Charlotte, because Elon didn't use the word task during the day. They didn't say task at daycare. They didn't say task at home. Charlotte did nothing. She didn't wake him. She didn't turn on the light. She simply walked backward and returned to the bedroom. She got into bed. James was asleep. She thought about waking him. Then she stopped, because she already knew his first question. What did you see? And Charlotte didn't have a clear answer. At breakfast the next morning, everything looked normal. Elon drank his juice. Crumbs fell onto the table. James opened his newspaper. Before speaking, Charlotte watched Elon for a long time. "Elon, do you remember anything from last night?" Elon looked up. His gaze was calm, his face empty. "No." When a child says no, they usually avoid your eyes. They smile. They change the subject. Elon didn't. He simply said, "No." Charlotte didn't ask again, because a second question would make the first one serious. And that day, even in the school library, Charlotte noticed something. The silence bothered her. Because silence was not the same as the silence from that night. The first night could have been a coincidence. Sleep-talking happens. The second night could still be called chance. But the third night, Charlotte could no longer say the word coincidence. On the third night, Charlotte sat on the edge of the bed. She put her phone on silent. She walked down the hallway without turning on the light. She kept Elon's bedroom door closed. But this time she was holding a small device. An old voice recorder James used in the garage. Cheap. Simple. But it worked. Charlotte later said her hand was shaking as she set it up. For a mother, recording is not a normal thing. You watch your child, you listen, you remember. But recording feels like searching for proof. That night, Charlotte wasn't looking for proof. She just wanted to convince herself. The clock reached 2:17 again, and Elon spoke. Elon, recording. They will not believe until they see. When Charlotte heard the sentence, she looked at the small red light on the device. It was on, which meant what she heard was real. At least, it existed on tape. In the days that followed, the sentences multiplied. February 18th. I was sent before. February 20th. The message is not new. February 23rd. Not a story. A reminder. Charlotte opened a notebook at the kitchen table. Normally, she wrote the way she catalogued books. Neat, ordered. But in this notebook, her handwriting changed. Sometimes she stopped in the middle of a word. Sometimes she underlined a sentence 3 times. One night, James saw the notebook. "What's this?" he asked. Charlotte didn't answer at first. Then she did. "What I hear." It wouldn't be true to say James didn't believe the recordings. James didn't call them fake. He called them something else. He heard it on television. He heard it at daycare. You might have said it without realizing. He dreamed something. Each sentence James spoke was like trying to plug a cable back into place. Because if the cable fit, the light would turn on. If it didn't, panic followed. One night, Charlotte turned to James. "We don't watch religious programs at home." James stayed silent. "There is no Church of England instruction at daycare." James stayed silent again. "So what are you saying?" he asked. Charlotte's answer was simple, and the most frightening answers are usually simple. "I don't know." That night, before falling asleep, James wanted to say, "You're exaggerating." But he didn't, because he had heard the voice too. And that voice, even if it sounded like Elon's, didn't speak the way Elon spoke. The following week, Charlotte visited a child psychologist. Dr. Rachel Moore was a calm woman. Her office was filled with toys, colorful drawings, everything designed to put children at ease. But Charlotte didn't feel at ease there. "Sleep-talking in children is normal," Dr. Moore said. "At this age, it's even more common." "But it's consistent," Charlotte said. "Always at the same time." Dr. Moore took notes. Then she looked up. "The words aren't important, Charlotte. The brain sometimes produces random things." Charlotte paused. Then she read a single word from her notebook. "Yeshua." Dr. Moore's pen stopped for a second. "Where could he have heard that word?" she asked. "That's the problem," Charlotte said. "Nowhere." And that day, for the first time, when a specialist heard the words "nowhere" at all, she fell silent. By the 3rd week, Charlotte transferred the recordings to her computer. She sorted the files by date. She gave them names like 02_17_14 Feb. That alone said something, because people don't file ordinary things. If you file it, it's no longer ordinary. On a friend's recommendation, she contacted a linguist, Professor Alan Kershaw from the University of Canterbury. Kershaw worked with sound. He listened to rhythm, stress, word choice. From how people speak, he could sometimes guess who they were. When Charlotte sent the recordings, she didn't write a long explanation. She wrote only this: "My 5-year-old son's sleep speech. It doesn't feel normal to me." The next day the phone rang. Professor Kershaw's voice was tired and curious. "How old did you say the child was?" he asked. 5, Charlotte said. There was a brief silence on the line. Not an "I can't hear you" silence, a thinking silence. "The sentence structure doesn't belong to a 5-year-old, Kershaw said. Charlotte's throat went dry. What do you mean? Kershaw chose his words carefully. Not like an academic, but like someone holding something fragile. The syntax is mature. Some expressions are archaic. It resembles the language of the King James Bible, but it's not a direct quotation. That matters, because if it were a quotation, we'd look for a source. So what does that mean? Charlotte asked. Kershaw's answer became the sentence Charlotte would hear the most. I have no idea. Then he added something else. There's a strange layer in the recordings. What kind of layer? Charlotte asked. Sometimes, just before the sentence begins, there's a very brief moment. Not a breath. More like preparation, as if someone else is about to speak. When Charlotte heard this, her mind jumped back to the first night. The way the voice didn't seem to come from the throat. That settled tone. Could it be editing? Charlotte asked, almost as if she wanted to accuse herself. I don't hear cuts or splices, Kershaw said. It sounds raw, unprocessed. But of course, I can't be certain. Kershaw asked to bring a copy of the recordings into a small sound lab at the university. Not an official case. Just analysis, Charlotte agreed, because there was something she could no longer carry alone. And sometimes, you don't hand something to another person to share the weight, but to confirm that the weight is real. That weekend, Charlotte replaced the recorder with a better microphone. James didn't want her to. This is turning into an obsession, he said. It's not an obsession, Charlotte replied. It's something. Something what? James asked. Charlotte's answer didn't change. I don't know. But that night, as James walked from the garage back into the house, he glanced at the fuse box, as if he wanted to check something, because he had noticed it too. Every night, as 2:17 approached, the house became strangely quiet. And even if you're an electrical engineer, sometimes you can't measure silence. On the night of March 1st, 2019, Charlotte placed the recorder near Elon's bedroom door. She closed the door. Then she sat down on the hallway floor. Sometimes a person wants to hear more clearly the very thing they are afraid of. It's irrational, but it's real. When the clock reached 2:17, Elon's voice came through. Elon, Yeshua. This time, Charlotte felt the hair on her arms rise, because this word was not just a religious word. It felt like a key turning inside a lock. Elon paused. Elon, Yeshua, comes not with clouds. Charlotte did not stop the recording, because if she stopped it, the words would remain hanging in the air. If she kept recording, they would become a document. In the morning, Charlotte opened the internet. She searched for Yeshua. Results appeared. Article titles, forums, academic texts. Charlotte's expression hardened, because this was not an everyday word, not a daycare word, not a children's book word. Charlotte didn't say it was impossible. She only asked, why? Because what's stranger than knowing a word is placing that word correctly. Charlotte met with a theologian from the University of Canterbury, the Reverend Dr. Thomas Hart. His office was lined with shelves of books, Latin titles, old editions, yellowed pages. Charlotte played the recording, the part where Elon said, Yeshua. The pronunciation is correct, Hart said. What? Charlotte asked. Many people mispronounce it, Hart replied. But here, the stress is right. For a 5-year-old child, getting that right by chance is difficult. Charlotte's hands gripped the edge of the desk. Hart continued. Yeshua is one of the historical names of Jesus. You see it in academic texts. But it's not commonly used in everyday church language, especially in this region. You don't hear it often. So this is unusual, Charlotte said. Hart nodded slowly. Yes, unusual. Charlotte also spoke with Pastor Atkinson at the cathedral. Atkinson was more severe. If you're looking for a miracle, he said, you're in the wrong place. I'm not looking for a miracle, Charlotte replied. I'm looking for an explanation. Sometimes they're the same, Atkinson said. Then he stopped, as if the thought itself had unsettled him. If this truly were a divine message, he finally said, why would it come from a 5-year-old child? Why Canterbury? Why now? Charlotte couldn't answer, because those questions were also hers. That night, Elon spoke again. Elon, in his sleep. He remembers. A pause. Elon. He remembers. All of them. Charlotte whispered through the door crack. Who does he remember, Elon? There was no answer. Then there was. Elon. The ones who waited. Charlotte wrote the sentence in her notebook. She underlined it. Then she closed the page, because sometimes a person cannot bear to keep looking at what they have written. Canterbury Hospital, Pediatric Neurology Unit. Dr. Susan Price was an experienced neurologist, not emotional, not rushed. She listened to the recordings. She took notes. Then she said, the EEG results are normal. No signs of epilepsy. James felt relief. Then what's the problem? He asked. I didn't say there was a problem, Dr. Price replied. I just can't explain it. That sentence unsettled James. Because I can't explain it is a phrase engineers don't like. Elon underwent an MRI. Blood tests were done. His sleep patterns were monitored. A psychological evaluation followed. All of it came back normal. The reports said physical, normal neurological, normal behavioral, normal. But there was one thing the reports did not mention. The child kept speaking at night. One night in the sleep laboratory, electrodes were placed on Elon's head, bands around his chest, sensors on his fingers. The technician said, if he speaks during REM sleep, we'll see it. That's when dreams happen. The clock reached 2:17. Elon. He will come like a thief. The waveforms on the monitor were not what they should have been. It wasn't REM sleep. The technician leaned closer to the screen, swallowed. That's not possible, he said. What's not possible? Dr. Price asked. He's in deep sleep, the technician said. Clear speech at this level of sleep is extremely rare. And sentences like that. Dr. Price listened to the recording. There was a very small movement on her face, as if the corner of her mouth tightened for just a moment. Then she composed herself. That night, a small meeting was held at the hospital. Dr. Price, Professor Kershaw, Dr. Hart, and another child psychologist. No one said miracle. No one said devil. No one said possession, because once those words enter a room, they don't leave. They said only this: we can't explain it. Perhaps looking for a medical explanation is wrong, Dr. Hart said. Then what are we looking for? Dr. Price asked. Perhaps nothing, Hart replied. Perhaps we're simply listening. After the meeting, James snapped at Charlotte at home. He didn't say, "You're exaggerating." He couldn't. He only said, "This is going to destroy us." "Not us," Charlotte said. "Me." "Why?" James asked. "Because I hear it," Charlotte said. "You only listen." That sentence drew a line between them, a thin line, and at night that line became more visible. That night at home, at exactly 2:17, a small click came from the fuse box. The lights didn't go out, but James heard it. He went down to the garage, opened the box. Everything was in place. As he closed the cover, James whispered to himself, "This is nonsense." But his voice did not sound convinced. By the end of March, Charlotte's notebook was full. Dates, times, sentences. Some repeated, some continued. One night, Charlotte listened to all the recordings from beginning to end, with headphones on, lights off, only the pale glow of the screen, and for the first time, inside what had seemed random, she saw a structure. He is coming. Not yet. The task will be completed. It felt like an opening, like the beginning of a story. Then came Yeshua. That felt like the who. Then came, I waited before. That was the past, and the sentence, children see first, felt like something pointing forward, toward the future. Charlotte wrote it all on a whiteboard. She drew arrows, put boxes around phrases, made connections. One day, she searched the university library for books on reincarnation. That alone felt strange to her. A colleague at the desk said, "Seriously? What else can I do?" Charlotte replied. Some traditions claimed that children remember past lives, usually between the ages of 3 and 7. Then they forget. When Charlotte read this, Elon's age suddenly felt like a window, as if something had opened and would soon close. Charlotte read the research of Ian Stevenson, more than 2,500 cases, names, places, causes of death. But what Elon was saying didn't sound like a past life story. He wasn't naming locations. He wasn't naming families. What Elon spoke sounded more like a message. That disturbed Charlotte even more, because a memory of a past life belongs to one person. A message is meant for others. And one night, Elon said, "Elon, they asked before, are you the one?" A pause. "Elon, I did not answer then. I will not answer now." Charlotte stopped the recording, because that sentence left something heavy inside the house. What was then? What was before? After that, Charlotte began watching Elon more closely during the day. She listened carefully to what he said after daycare. She watched how he played. Elon lined up his toy cars, but not like children usually do. It looked less like play and more like order. One day, he drew a cathedral. Not the way children draw. Arches, columns, almost like a blueprint. Charlotte showed the drawing to James. James looked at it, said nothing, then slowly placed the paper back on the table. "This," he said, Where did this come from? I don't know, Charlotte said. Did you ask Elon? James asked. I did, Charlotte said. He doesn't remember. For the first time, James paused as if something had just aligned. He doesn't remember. It felt like the key word in Elon's life. And that night, for the first time, before going to bed, James looked at the voice recorder, as if that small red light was the only real thing left in the house. April 2019. By the 5th week, the story leaked. Who leaked it? Charlotte never found out for sure. But some things announce themselves. One day, she found her neighbor, Mrs. Dalloway, standing at the door. An elderly woman, known in the neighborhood as pleasant. Everything all right at night? Mrs. Dalloway asked. Yes, Charlotte said, but the yes came too quickly. Sometimes, the woman added, children talk. Then she changed the subject. In that moment, Charlotte felt that someone had heard. Not heard like listening to a recording. Heard like sensing. A week later, a small article appeared in the local newspaper. A child in Canterbury speaks religious messages in his sleep. When Charlotte saw it, it felt like someone had opened her front door out on the street. The doorbell rang. Journalists, cameras, microphones. Mrs. Williams, is it true your child claims to be Jesus? No, Charlotte said. We never said that. Then what does he say in his sleep? James stepped in. No comment. In that moment, there was something on James's face. Not anger, not fear, loss of control. Social media followed. Twitter, Canterbury child is definitely a scam. Facebook, the parents are using him for attention. Reddit, no video proof. Fake. But one comment was different. What if it isn't? That comment stayed with Charlotte all night, because what if it isn't is like a door left ajar. Once you see it, you can't close it again. A skeptical investigator arrived soon after. Michael West. He introduced himself as a defender of science. This is classic, he said to the camera. Parents unconsciously guide the child. Charlotte wanted to respond, but Dr. Hart stopped her. Don't speak to the media, he said. From this point on, no matter what you say, the story will choose its own direction. There was a protest in front of the cathedral. This is abuse of sacred names, some shouted. Listen to the child, others yelled back. Elon seemed not to understand any of it, but his body language changed. At daycare, other children were kept away from him. His teacher, Lucy, said to Charlotte, some parents. She couldn't finish the sentence. The pressure is too much, Lucy finally said, and the word pressure now held everything. Elon no longer played. They didn't let him. One day, walking home, Elon squeezed Charlotte's hand. He never did that. When she looked at him, his eyes were on the ground, as if he were trying to escape the noise. That night, Charlotte wrote in her notebook, it's no longer just inside the house. It's outside now. And sometimes the real fear is not what happens inside a home, but what spills out of it. On the night of April 16th, 2019, something in the house felt different. Charlotte couldn't explain it, but she knew it was different. James wanted to sleep early. He was exhausted. Constant phone calls, the doorbell, the pressure. Charlotte didn't sleep. She sat in the hallway. The recorder was running. The time was approaching. 2:17. Elon spoke. Elon, this is the last. Charlotte's heart felt as if it dropped straight into that sentence. Elon, I will not speak again. This wasn't a child sentence, because a child doesn't say, I will not speak again. A child says, I won't talk, stubbornly. But here, there was no stubbornness. There was decision. A long silence followed. Inside that silence, Charlotte stood up. She walked toward the door. Elon. The message was not for them. Charlotte's hand touched the handle. Elon. It was for you. Charlotte opened the door. Elon was in bed, eyes closed, breathing steady. Charlotte sat on the edge of the bed, the way a mother sits, quiet, careful. Elon, you will remember when the time comes. Charlotte's eyes filled, but she didn't admit it even to herself, because crying in that moment would have meant ending something. Elon, the end is not loud. A pause. Elon, it is close, like breath. And then the recording continued. For minutes there was only the sound of breathing. As Charlotte listened, she thought, is this breath Elon's breath, or the room's? When morning came, Elon woke up, like a normal child. Good morning, Mum. Charlotte smiled. She didn't know if the smile was real. Elon, do you remember anything from last night? Elon paused. This was different from the earlier no's. He thought. No, he said. Then, as if the sentence slipped out on its own, he added, but something ended, didn't it? In that moment, Charlotte felt that the words had not come from his throat. They had come from somewhere inside her. Yes, Charlotte said. Something ended. Elon returned to his breakfast, as if the conversation had never happened. But later that day, walking through the school library, Charlotte said every shelf felt like an archive, because now she was carrying one herself. And the heaviest part of an archive is not what's written inside it, but what isn't. October 1st, 2019. After that night, Elon never spoke in his sleep again. That sentence sounds comforting, but for Charlotte, strangely, it wasn't, because not speaking meant it was over. And over left one question hanging. What was it? The tests continued. Dr. Moore wrote her report. Development appropriate for age. Parasomnia symptoms resolved. No behavioral issues observed. On paper, everything was clean. On paper. But Charlotte kept listening to the recordings. Every week. Sometimes every night. As she listened, she wasn't focused on the sentences anymore, but on the spaces between them, the gaps. Because sometimes the real message is not inside the sentence, but in the silence it leaves behind. James tried to forget. He spent more time in the garage, buried himself in work, as if the order of cables could restore the order of life. One evening, Charlotte found James in the garage, staring at the fuse box. He looked embarrassed, then closed the cover without explaining anything. Charlotte said nothing, because some questions are never asked, even inside a marriage. The University of Canterbury archived the recordings. Professor Kershaw assigned a file number, CW 2019-02-14. Status open. That word stayed with Charlotte. Open, like a door left open, like a file left open, like a wound. One day, Dr. Hart asked Charlotte, "Are you still looking for an explanation?" Charlotte thought for a moment. "I don't know," she said. "Sometimes I don't want an explanation. Sometimes I just want to know that it won't come back." "How do we know it won't?" Dr. Hart asked. In that moment, for the first time, Charlotte felt that even an expert was carrying the same fear. Elon, meanwhile, began to look like a normal child. He had friends at school. He laughed. He ran. But every Sunday, when they went to the cathedral, Elon lifted his head again, to the same place. One day, Charlotte tried to follow his gaze. She looked at what he was looking at. Stone. Arch. Nothing. But Elon's eyes weren't looking at nothing. It was as if he was looking at something that didn't exist for Charlotte. And the heaviest moment for a mother is realizing she cannot reach what her child can see. One Sunday morning, Pastor Atkinson delivered his sermon. Because he will come like a thief, not when you expect it, but when you are not ready. Charlotte had heard that sentence before, but this time she noticed a very small movement on Elon's face. Very slight, like recognition. Did Elon smile? No. It wasn't a smile. It was as if something passed through him, brushed his face for a moment, and then withdrew. Charlotte felt ice spread inside her, because children smile sometimes. But recognition is something else. When the service ended, Charlotte didn't ask Elon anything. She didn't dare, because the answer to that question could have reshaped their lives. That night at home, Charlotte woke again at 2:17. Even though Elon no longer spoke in his sleep, she still woke, like the body learning a habit, an alarm without an alarm. Charlotte sat up into bed. She listened. The house was silent, but that silence still wasn't empty. Charlotte took the recorder out of the drawer where she had put it away years ago. The battery was dead. She plugged it in. A small light appeared on the screen. In that moment, Charlotte thought, "Why am I doing this?" She had no answer. Maybe that was why there was no answer. She placed the recorder on the table, sat down, and waited, because that had been Elon's first word. Wait. As Charlotte waited, the file in the university archive was still open. In an interview, Professor Kershaw had said, "We still haven't found an explanation. And to be honest, I'm no longer sure we're even looking for one." Dr. Hart had said, "The line between faith and science is blurred. This case challenges both." Charlotte stood by the window and looked outside. The sky was dark, and in her mind, Elon's final sentence kept repeating, "The end is not loud. It is close, like breath." It wasn't spoken like a threat. It wasn't spoken like news. It sounded more like a reminder. And now only one question remained. Was Elon remembering something? Or were we the ones searching for meaning? Black screen. Only sound. From the recording, a distant echo. "You will remember when the time comes."